All right, just bear with me here while I get this ready. I actually already did this once before and forgot to hit record, so take two. Uh, but for this week's book talk, I am doing Moments in History through Picture Books. Um, all the books are not are about all the books are not specifically about specific moments in history, but are about history itself or little pieces of history. Um, Here we go. My table of contents. I'll have a brief introduction, then we'll get into the featured books. I have some related resources and then my references. Um, for my featured books, this week I am featuring 6 books for you. Last week I featured 3. This week I have 6. And since I have more books this week, last week I shared specific extension activities for the books. This week I am just going to share relevant resources or related resources that helped me with this book talk for you this week. So let's get started. My introduction. So my topic is moments in history through picture books. I chose this topic specifically because one of the 6 books that I am featuring in this book talk is actually how my love and passion for books and reading got started. It is the book that started it all for me, as they would say, and and it falls in, and it's a history book. Well, yeah, history book. Um, but and I also chose this topic because using picture books can be used to help discuss historical moments in age appropriate and meaningful ways. Um, and it can also make social studies concepts more concrete through the use of visual images that also or the illustrations in the books. So we're going to move on. So 3 of the books I am featuring this week are Ben Franklin's Big Splash, the mostly true story of his first invention. The second book is Trombone Shorty, which is about Troy Andrews, which is Trombone Shorty. And then the book that started it all, The Man Who Walked Between the Towers by Mordecai Gerstein. The 3 other books is Schoenberg, The Man Who Built a Library by Carol Boston Weatherford. Next, we have Brick by Brick, which is by Charles R. Smith Jr. And the last, we have Around America to Win the Vote. While not all of these are about this is the only one about specific time periods in history, but each of these books talks about a piece of history, whether it be a person or construction of an important monument or the right, earning the right, like spreading awareness for the women's rights to vote. All of these books can be linked to talking about history and moments in history, and they can all be used to spark the interest of a child. The first book is Big Franklin's Big Splash. So I love this book because it makes you think that you too can be an inventor. It every time I read this, I'm like, oh man, I could make things. Um, but it talks about Ben Franklin's first invention, which is swim fins, basically paddles to help him swim. Um, See, here they are. Just little paddles that basically help him swim. But it basically talks about how that invention led him to create all the inventions that we know today, and it even has a visual spread of the inventions that we know about that Ben Franklin invented. And then all the way at the end, I'm the nerd that reads up like even the end pages, but it has a timeline of Ben Franklin's life. I absolutely loved that. But even though the story itself is not completely true, it can be used as a read aloud to introduce Ben Franklin or the topic of inventing. You could use this book in many ways. Great book. But it makes the life of Ben Franklin more interesting while in bringing it to life with the beautiful illustrations. Um, Here's just one of them. I like how happy he is in here. Great book. This is a primary. It's for the primary grades. It could be used with older grades, but it's definitely more for primary, like the younger grades. Trombone Shorty, one of my absolute favorites. I actually got this one. I got to see the illustrator at the Children's Literature Festival several years back, and I have it autographed. I love this book. I'll try not to dwell on it too much. But this book is about Troy Andrews and how he made his dream of becoming a musician a reality. It's a Coretta Scott King Award book and a Caldecott Honor book. The illustrations are absolutely beautiful. I spend just as much time looking at the book as I do reading the story. It's about ooh, not sure what happened there. But it's about Troy and when he was younger and how he started playing. And then he played at a parade, and then even at the end of the book, it says that he still goes back to that same parade every year. So I love how he never forgot basically where he started from. He never forgot his roots, and I love that. But this is actually a picture of Troy. I mean, it's not as recent because this book is a couple years old now. But it even includes a picture of him when he was little. But but it was all during a big musical movement. But it just talks about how he basically made it. He made his dream a reality. Beautiful book. I could talk about the pictures forever, honestly. But this could be used when talking about dreams, or it could be used to talk about just a diversity book. It could be used to talk about major points in history, like musical movements or women's suffrage time period. Oh, wrong book. The women's suffrage time period. The uses for this book could be endless. It could just be used during music class when you're introducing them to wind instruments, while also giving them a little history lesson. Great book. I could talk about the pictures in there forever, but also for the primary grades. And then this is the book that started it all for me. I'll try not to linger on this one too much, but this one, I first was introduced to this book during my undergraduate years. I was taking children's literature with Dr. William Bingman at Frostburg State University. He read this book aloud to us, and then I was actually assigned this book to do a project on. I fell in love with books and with reading after this. I didn't know children's books could be so educational, and after I heard this book, I was hooked. This book is about Philippe Petit. He's a man who walked between the Twin Towers while they were still being constructed. And there's actually a YouTube video about the story, because this is a true story. He's from France, and he tied a tightrope between the Twin Towers when they were still being built and walked across it for hours. Police actually wanted him to get down, but then he was basically like, "Are you going to come and get me?" and stayed up there until basically the sun, like, it moving, like, powerful, like, brave. But and I didn't know, like, you could learn something like that from a book. But before this book, I wasn't really a reader. I didn't really grow up around books. I wasn't given that opportunity to be a lifelong learner before this book. Um, but then I included the title. Oh, I ah I included the title of that YouTube video for the story, but then I also included another one about him walking between the Cathedral Church, St. John the Divine. Um, they don't have an actual. I mean, there is actually a movie that is about this. It's called The Wire. I've never seen it. But I've heard it's good. But these YouTube videos give you a glimpse of what this experience is like. But I included this one just because I didn't know there was a man who walked between the towers. Um, that was amazing to me, especially for considering that. Well, I thought it was amazing, especially now that the towers are unfortunately are not even around. But this was a beautiful book, and it's what started it all for me. And so I had to include it in this because even though it's not a specific time in history, it is about a specific person and what he did. Like I thought what he did was history because no one's ever done it since. Like he was the one and only. And so I to me, I think that's worth mentioning. But great book. I'm gonna just because I love this book so much and I want to give you a sense of what it's about. I'm gonna read the first couple pages. Once there were two towers side by side. They were each a quarter of a mile high, 1,340 feet. The tallest buildings in New York City. A young man saw them rise into the sky. He was a street performer. He rode a unicycle. He jiggled balls and fiery torches. But most of all, he loved to walk and dance on a rope he tied between two trees. It's hard to see, but the colors and the illustrate. I absolutely love the illustration in this book. I can. It's almost like if you look closely, you can almost see each stroke in the pictures. Last page. He looked not at the towers, but at the space between them, and thought, "What a wonderful place to stretch a rope, a wire on which to walk." Once the idea came to him, he knew he had to do it. If he saw three balls, he had to juggle. If he saw two towers, he had to walk. That's how he was. Absolutely beautiful book. Also for the primary grades, but it's inspiring. It basically maybe not something as drastic as that, but it basically gives you the idea that you can do anything you put your mind to, even if it's something hard. The next one is Schoenberg, The Man Who Built a Library. This is the only book that is for upper elementary / middle school age, but it's about Arturo Schoenberg, and he created a library filled with African American artifacts, and that it is now known as the Schoenberg Center for Research in Black Culture. This is it basically goes about how he dedicated his life to collecting all these artifacts, and basically by the time he was done collecting, he had enough that he had his own library. Um, in the back, it actually has a timeline about his life, and but I think the illustrations. You're probably tired of hearing me say it, but they're amazing, beautiful. You can tell, like you can actually see the detail in them. But and I thought I thought this was a great book to learn about such an important person that dedicated his life to collecting African American history, because all his hard work is an important part in their history, in their culture, because without him and his dedication, who knows if we would have half those artifacts today. But it's definitely a longer book. It's 40 pages, but it's definitely a great read. If it's used as a read aloud, it should definitely be read over a course of several days, um, even if it is for older kids. Um, Great book to learn about Arturo and how he made a library, and that library actually inspired other libraries to be built. The next one, Brick by Brick. This is a primary book too. Sorry, I don't know what that noise was. My cat's doing something. Um, but Brick by Brick, this is for the primary grades too. This book is about the construction of the White House, and it's written in poems. It's the only book that is like this, that I included in this book talk. The illustrations are absolutely beautiful, um, but it gives you an idea of what it was like to be one of the slaves that worked on the White House. I'm going to read just a few pages just because I think the poems are beautiful. They kind of make you feel like you were there in a sense. But diggers swing axes to break up stone, laying the foundation for the president's home. Jerry, Jess, Charles, Lynn, Dick, Bill, Harry, Jim. Sorry, my cat. Slave hands swing axes 12 hours a day. But slave owners take, slave hands pay. Slave hands sweat under a bright sun. Slave hands toil until each day is done. I don't know about you, but I can tell the long hours just by that short poem. But it gives you, and then even in another thing I like about this book, well, besides the poems, but in the back, it actually gives you a short thing about why the slaves were used to build the White House. And I thought that was really cool, because we all know about the White House, but we don't really know about its construction. And so this book really helps gives you an idea of what that was like. Excellent book. I actually saw Floyd Cooper when he came to the Children's Literature Festival many years ago, and this book is signed. Absolutely, I loved hearing him. His talk, it was so inspiring back then. But one more book. Actually, the second time around is actually faster. But so in a way, I guess it works out. The last book is actually Around America to Win the Vote. Two Suffrages, a Kitten, and 10,000 Miles. I really like this book. It's also for the primary grades, but in this book is about the journey of Nell Richardson and Alice Burke, and their journey across America in a yellow car with a kitten, and they travel over 10,000 miles to spread awareness and support for equal voting rights for women. Um, this this book is an excellent opportunity to bring an important time in history to life with colorful illustrations and a great story. It kind of gives you an idea of how hard women had to work to even get anywhere close to having the right to vote. Like these two ladies traveled over 10,000 miles just to spread awareness in hopes that they might earn more votes when that time came. I thought it was absolutely powerful. And I also love the illustrations. There's a lot of yellow throughout the book, but yellow is actually it stood for votes for women everywhere in the United States, and it actually says that in the back of the book here. Um, but it just kind of gives you an idea of what they did just to get the right to vote. It's a great book. It could be used to talk about that time period when you're introducing it, or it can be used in a text set. Excellent resource to learn about that time in history. My last book talk, I included specific extension activities to go with the books. But since I included double the books this time, I included 6 books compared to 3 in my last book talk. I included some resources that were useful to me in creating this book talk and deciding on the topic. I kind of struggled to decide what topic I was going to do for this book talk because there's so many good topics out there. I could I could talk to you about books all day, but I chose this one in the end because I honestly wanted to share The Man Who Walked Between the Towers with you. Um, and but anyways, so all these books can be used in text sets or even as read alouds in your book in your classroom. But an in text set is kind of like a group of books about a certain topic. And even though these aren't about a specific topic, they're all about history and people in history. Or moments in history, and so they can be used as a text set together. But I also, one of the resources I included is a Reading Rockets resource, and it's all about themed book lists. And there's over 50 of them, and each book list features books about a specific theme, whether it be hats or animals or the alphabet or poetry. And even though history picture books are not a topic on there, I figured this would be a great resource for to share with you, because I've referenced it several times when trying to find books for units in my pre-K classroom. Um, and so that's a great resource. And then even though I guess I'll do left to right. Next, I want to talk about this Lexile Find a Book. This is a great tool for determining the Lexile level of a book. All the Lexile levels featured throughout this book talk, even though I did not necessarily specify them, many of the books feature a Lexile level. I got all of them using this Lexile Find a Book. It's a great tool to determine if a book is age appropriate or not. And once you create an account, it also includes other resources like vocabulary and different things like that. Definitely a great resource. I use that pretty frequently. And then before I move on, all of these links I will actually add in my post so you have them. So that way you don't have to go back and like try and find them in my reference section at the end of this video. I'll include the links for all of them. This next one is, even though I did not include specific resources for the books, this resource kind of has some of those. Teachingbooks.net is a great resource, and all 6 of the books in this book talk can be found on there. And they include resources. They have author and illustrator interviews. That's actually my favorite part about the website. I really enjoy watching and listening to the author and illustrator interviews because it really gives you an idea of their thought process as they were creating the book and different other things. But there's other resources for each of the books on there as well. But then also, I'm a nerd. I like puzzles. There's Jigsaw. Teachingbooks.net also offers jigsaw puzzles of each of the 6 books' front covers, from 4-piece puzzles all the way up to 36 pieces. And so I thought that was fun. I did 1 or 2, but and so great resource right here for these 6 books and many, many other books. Excuse me. And then the last resource is It's a webinar. It's a 1 hour webinar. I know what you mean, but a 1 hour webinar. Honestly, I thought that at first, because who wants to listen to a webinar when you have so many other things to do? But I found this webinar to be really useful and very informative. But it's a webinar about using picture books to teach it's like tough historical topics and current events. It's free. You do have to create an account to listen to it, but it's free once you create an account. Great resource. I definitely recommend listening to that if you find some time. But once again, I will add all of these links as a like when I upload my video, and these are my references. And thank you. I hope you enjoyed this book talk. I know it was a little bit different than my last one. And even though they all aren't for specific periods in time, I think they can be used to talk about history with students. And I hope you enjoyed it. If anything, I hope you got some great books to add to your classroom library. Thanks. See you next time.